Hey, it's Soul with news hot and oh my god it's hot. And I'm going to talk about the World of Warcraft economy. There's been a lot of talk going on for the past 2 or so expansions about these growing fears of inflation because of how easy it is to obtain gold. With systems like the Garrison and the WoW token in the Warlords of Draenor expansion, the talking got a little bit louder, with concerns and even conspiracy theories about Blizzard somehow masterminding some scheme to sell boatloads of WoW tokens. In the past few builds of the Legion beta, we've seen that the gold cap has been raised to 10 million gold, up from the previous 1 million. Also, a vendor called the Mad Merchant has appeared, who sells some really ridiculously priced goods, including a spider mount that goes for 2 million gold. So as expected, the talk has become a little bit more fearful of the economy as of late, even prompting a few responses from the dev team. So I'm going to do a high-level analysis of the WoW economy, but I want to make a few things clear. As much as I want this to be a short video because it's hot, it might not be. There's a good bit to cover and a lot for me to say, and I really want to try and make my points clear. The WoW economy follows some fundamental economic rules. It's not really comparable to a real-world economy, so a lot of rules don't apply. It's just a game. But that said, economics is kind of complicated, and it doesn't help that I'm not very intelligent. So take everything that I say here as just my perspective, or I guess just an opinion. So in this analysis, I'm going to try to figure out a few things, like, is the current economic and commerce structure healthy for the game? Will this structure change in Legion? And why is there even a Mad Merchant? So first, we have to separate the WoW economy into 2 unequal parts, the side that follows market forces and the side that does not. It's important that we understand these 2 sides because we're only going to talk about one of them. As we've seen throughout the history of WoW, different kinds of currencies have been introduced and are very tightly regulated by Blizzard's design. This includes honor and conquest points, valor points and tokens, Apexis crystals, garrison resources, that kind of stuff. It's stuff that's not gold. These currencies have been necessary to the health of the overall WoW economy for 2 reasons. One is to put players at a more even playing field at the start of an expansion or a tier, and to artificially set a predictable pace that players could obtain certain items and gear. If not, players could easily gold their way to a very high item level early on. In fact, on a more fundamental level, gold would just negate content at an extreme level, and players with a drive to obtain large amounts of gold would be too advantageous in certain degrees. An alternative would be to put all of these items on just random loot tables and outside of the economy, and I'm sure players would love that. Those are 2 big extremes, and currently Blizzard strikes a balance between both, but players may disagree with this depending on your luck or ability to earn gold. So now we've talked alternative currencies, let's talk about gold. Once again, we'll split the gold-based market into 2 types, one that is regulated by market forces and one that is not. Examples of what is not are items sold by NPCs, repairs, and respec costs. These costs, like the non-gold markets I previously mentioned, are designed and regulated by Blizzard. Costs of certain things like mounts have been changed over the years, and reputations with specific factions lower the cost from related vendors. But those are all by design, and they don't have anything to do with market forces. The cost of repairs and transmog have gone up over the years, but this is because of a calculation that's based on its slots and item level. Everyone is paying more gold to repair, and no player is getting any of it, so while this can be technically called inflation, the gold isn't going to other players' hands. Now all we have left, finally, is the gold-based economy that's influenced by players. This includes tangible things like materials, black market items, the WoW token, and gear, as well as services such as arena carries, mythic runs, stuff in that vein. This is basically what all player economic activity in WoW is based around, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's talk about where gold comes from. The World of Warcraft has been a thing for nearly 12 years, and apart from maintenance downtime, gold is being generated by players every second. I'm sure that there's a staggering amount of gold at play right now, and maybe even a greater amount that's sitting in the millions of inactive accounts, just waiting to be used. Gold enters the market through a number of ways, including lootable mobs, quest rewards, and selling items directly to vendors. A small but notable source that I'll mention is what I'll call error correction when purchasing the WoW token. When a player buys a token from the Blizzard store with the intent to sell, the auction house will quote a guaranteed amount that will be given to the seller, regardless of how much the token was actually purchased for. So, for example, if Bob put up a token and the auction house quoted like 50 grand, and Nerd Rage X bought a token from the auction house while the price was at 35 grand, Bob would still get the 50 grand as promised, and 15k is just kinda generated out of thin air. Other gold generators exist within reward systems, including completing guild challenges, daily dungeon and raid rewards, and of course garrison missions. And as players enter the game, this gold effect is multiplied as more and more players participate in these activities. So how does gold leave the market, or otherwise, what are gold sinks? Repairs are the closest thing to a guaranteed gold sink in the game. After all, pretty much everyone needs to repair at some point. There's also respec and transmog fees, and purchases from a vendor. The black market auction house is a little bit more unique in that it's the only gold sink that's directly influenced by the market. I bought an Ashes of Alara when it was about 150 grand, so hey, good on me, but today I'm sure it might be a little bit more. Selling stuff in the auction house incurs a 15% sales fee. This is more like a tax than a gold sink, but it still does remove gold from the market. Players leaving the game not only lowers the rate that gold is generated, but with gold still in their possession, this is also taken out of the economy, unless they come back, but that's whatever. So again, there's a lot of talk about players amassing tons of gold thanks to garrisons, and that this inflation thing has become an untenable topic. But what is inflation? Here's Google to help me out. Inflation is defined as a sustained increase in the general level of prices for goods and services. As inflation rises, every dollar or gold you own buys a smaller percentage of a good or service. So inflation occurs when there's too much currency like gold and it assumes the same supply of goods and services. It's a safe assumption to say that gold is easier than ever to learn, but it's for multiple reasons, and it's not just because of garrison missions. Since the launch of pretty much every WoW expansion, older content is trivialized and thus soloable. Especially today, it's a common practice to farm old dungeons and raids for transmog gear or old legendary items or gold. In the meantime, there's a lot of other gold to be picked up and old gear to vendor. YouTube videos are regularly uploaded to show off the best farming spots in WoW, complete with gold conversion rates and step-by-step guides on which class that works most efficiently, what should be auctioned or vendored, and so on. Drops in general are just worth more gold than they were before. The sell price of gear is determined by the gear slot and its item level. So basically, epic two-handed weapons fetch a bigger vendor price than an uncommon ring. So consider just those factors, and there are more. WoW is designed to have the rate of gold entering the market increase as time goes on. But an odd system was introduced in Mists of Pandaria that affected the movement of gold between players, namely the Tiller's Farm. This farm gave any player's character the ability to generate a small amount of whatever basic resource they needed. This is significant because to a small degree, it shifted effectiveness away from characters with a gathering profession. Less trading between players was involved to ensure that they had the resources that they needed. Warlords of Draenor pushed this way further thanks to the garrison systems, including work orders and the design of the profession system. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but with just a little bit of effort, a single character can have 2 crafting professions and pretty much be entirely self-sufficient. 2 or more characters with effort into garrison development, multiplied by the many players on a given realm, creates the scenario that we see now. Players who have very little need to interact with one another when it comes to commerce. Couple this with a mission table injecting gold into players' pockets with an easy investment, and suddenly we have a lot of players with a lot of gold and not enough to spend it on. Except services and black market stuff. So check out your auction house. On most realms, the price of materials and crafted gear, even BOE gear, isn't at a super inflated price. This is because, like I described earlier, both gold and materials are readily available to players. The idea of scarcity, which I'll go into detail later, is a laughable idea for anyone who understands the system. Inflation is negated by the easy supply of materials and goods. In the category of most tradable goods, gold value doesn't do a lot of movement at all. While materials are easy to obtain by players of any level, WoW services such as challenge mode and mythic carries are organized by high-level players and are typically available by appointment. The fact that the challenge mode gear and Archimon mount are guaranteed only up until the launch of the next expansion means that this service is indeed scarce. These services are almost entirely a seller's market, which is why we see the high costs we see today. Like I just said, there are a lot of players with a lot of gold and not enough stuff to spend it on except maybe services. These services will always exist in some form, and the price of these services will mostly depend on the disposable gold players possess, which is a lot. There's also the black market auction house. It's a bit easier to explain this, but on a given realm where the supply of an item is limited to only that one source, and the item is desirable like the otherwise unavailable tier 3 skins, you're going to see high bids among the richest players on that realm. Every realm is different, but I can loosely summarize the kind of general state of the economy. Price inflation among normal goods is mostly flat. much of it due to the easy supply of materials. Price inflation with high-end services and black market items have gone up due to the availability of gold. Gold is entering the market at a much faster rate than it is leaving it, despite the black market and the departure of players from the game. Whew. So before I go into why Legion may bring chaos into the economy, let's talk scarcity. Google says that scarcity is the state of being scarce, or in short supply, a shortage. Like I briefly mentioned earlier, since myths and warlords, scarcity hasn't really been a thing. Players are able to be pretty self-sufficient thanks to the farm and garrison. It's thanks to this that the commerce side of the community was diminished. I mean, why interact with other players when it's a lot easier to farm or pick from the garrison, right? Many moons ago, back in the days of Cataclysm, depending on the realm, it wouldn't be an uncommon thing to see resources suddenly dry up. It was up to and during this expansion that, apart from a few instances, basic resources were only available to characters with the right gathering profession. Occasionally something special would happen, like a bunch of bots get banned, or an event, like a new raid or a dungeon opening up. And suddenly the price of ore would triple because of the sudden increase in demand, thus the price of cut primordial rubies would also skyrocket. It was an interesting time to see enterprising players sit on specific resources and choke the supply in order to sell at higher prices. That was controlled scarcity at work. And that kind of scarcity is coming back in Legion. From my experience in Warlords, a single character can have 2 crafting professions but still produce over 1,000 herbs over the course of a week without so much as leaving the garrison. In Legion, that same character will produce 0 herbs. Gathering's going to be pretty easy in Legion thanks to increased yields and shared nodes, so there's no more fighting for a node unless you just feel like being a jerk. However, gathering will be the only way to obtain the ore, the herb, or the skin that you need. On top of that, these resources are all over the Broken Isles and not in a centralized, farm-like, garrison-like place. There's going to be a time or opportunity cost to gather these resources. It's this limit of supply that's going to affect the price of materials, and later crafted items, obliterum stuff, and fully upgraded gear. In other words, normal goods will return to a cataclysm-like economy, and players spoiled by garrison gold will be in for a rude awakening if they're not prepared. The new gold cap is going to be great for individual players and guild bangs, but also for the black market. It'll be interesting to see what items or mounts will sell for over 1 million gold. Finally, what about the Mad Merchant? What's its actual purpose? Players have mixed thoughts about spending 2 million gold on just a mount, but the same was said for a yak that had a vendor and a reforger, or transmogger. There are many wealthy players out there who say that they won't spend that kind of gold on a mount, and that the merchant is a bad idea for a gold sink. Other players say that the merchant is designed to get players to sell a bunch of WoW tokens and give more cash to Blizzard, but I don't think it's either of those things. If I were to design a conspiracy, I'd make the merchant items a bit more compelling somehow, and make them more affordable. The idea is kind of like pay to win. As of this recording, in the US region, the WoW token goes for about 50 grand. Buying 40 tokens to get a 2 million gold mount is insane. But if it were 250 to 500 grand, well, that's more like 5 or 10 tokens, and maybe that's something worth thinking about. The point of the merchant is really simple. There's already a lot of gold out there, it's in somebody's hands. Removing self-sufficiency from a single character reintroduces scarcity, and an opportunity for a lot of gold to exchange hands, preferably going to the players who want it the most and work the hardest. As for the items, it's only the next symbolic gesture from Blizzard to identify a player's wealth. This has been done over and over again, from faster flight to fancy bags to utility mammoths to yaks, and now some merchant that offers a wealth of ultimately useless goods to show off. There are a lot of players who generate lots of gold but don't spend it. I am not one of them. So there's the sheet for my vendor tune. I've made a lot of gold, but I've used almost all of it to buy the things that I felt were important to me, to finance some of my guild subscriptions, and even give away some crazy prizes for finishing a race or securing a name. Yes, I gave 1 million gold to secure my name. After nearly 12 years of WoW, we've seen the limits of what gold can do for a player, when it comes to things we can buy according to Blizzard's design, as well as what players charge for services. Those of us with more than 5, 10, or 20 plus million gold should realize by now that even among the rich, exorbitant merchants like this are probably as bad as it's ever going to get. Anyway, start thinking of what gathering profession you'll have. You'll probably need it. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Like and sub, and I'm curious, what gathering profession do you want to pick up, or do you think you can gold your way out of it? Or do you even care? Leave a comment below. I'm Soul. Stay breezy, guys. Or actually, stay cool and have some ice cream. Oh my god.